Consciousness. As learning progresses, the experience begins to be repeated. However, after the repetition of the experience, there is something else more subtle, which is the potential repetition of the experience. That is, it is the recollection of the same sensation, but now experienced in an attenuated way and in the absence of the stimulus that previously provoked it. For example, a pain and its memory. The memory of pain is painful, but not as much as the pain itself. Moreover, the pain was concomitant with a real physical organic alteration, and its memory was not. What characterizes memory and distinguishes it from sensation is, first, that it is attenuated, and second, that it occurs in the absence of the stimulus that provoked it. In summary, as learning progresses, first comes the repeated experience, then the anticipation of repetition, and we call this anticipation memory. Thus, the more sensations an individual is able to anticipate, the more easily he will be able to predict situations. Therefore, the more memory, the more skilled the organism will be, because it anticipates situations and prepares for them. When all past experience is compressed at a given moment in view of an upcoming future situation, the phenomenon we call consciousness occurs. Consciousness becomes ego insofar as the individual recounts to himself his past experiences and acts in a line of biographical historical continuity. That is, he reaffirms his desire to continue trying the same experiences already tried. The difference will be that this time he is not forced into these experiences by a repetition of the external situation, but he is the one who seeks them out. Thus, as this continuity is formed, a structure emerges that also limits the psyche. Self-limitation of the psyche and the ego. Besides being limited by physical, logical, and accidental needs, external needs that we recognize, there is a fourth limitation, which is a self-limitation. That is, the subject is limited by his own history as he has told it to himself. It is precisely this self-limitation that is called the ego. The ego opens up for the individual another sphere of action, that of social action. Thus, there is continuity and coherence between past and subsequent actions, which allows the individual to be recognized by others, not only by physical appearance, but as a human individuality. So, from the whole repertoire of possibilities that the psyche has, the individual amputees, cuts off immense parts, and does so partly due to physical needs, partly due to the pattern of logical needs, and partly due to chance, things that he learns as he develops. On the other hand, the individual amputees by his own will, by wanting certain things and not others. It doesn't matter much whether these choices are of his own free will or if they are copied from the outside. What matters is that he perseveres in some and not in others. These things in which he perseveres are his choices, and this is his history. Dr. Freud said that at the age of 5, the child already has a history. That is, the ego is already formed. It can be said that the ego is constituted when the subject's history begins to form a set, and he begins to repeat his entire history. Certain experiences are so repetitive within a broad cycle that the individual can predict that what has happened to him will continue to happen eternally, and that is him. This moment is particularly serious. And it is at this precise point that the selection of which Arthur Ianov spoke takes place, according to which certain needs that are not met are then abandoned. The individual believes that if a certain need has not been met up to that point, it is because it does not exist. As, for example, in the case of a child who wants a particular toy, asks for it repeatedly and never receives it. This child, then, ends up giving up that toy, and at the very moment he gives up, he identifies not with the desire for the toy, but with its lack, which then becomes part of his life, of his history. Until that moment, the absence of the toy was as if it were a causality, an external thing. But after a certain moment, it becomes part of his personal history. As long as it is a toy, everything is fine. But there are things much more important and even necessary than toys, such as opportunities for expression, affection, or even sometimes food, and even the most basic human respect. All this can be lacking, and at the age of 5, a deficiency is consolidated as part of this child's history. And the moment this has consolidated as part of his history, it is no longer useful for the missing need to be met from the outside world, because now there is no longer the organ to receive the missing thing. It is like the case, for example, of someone who went 40 days without eating. The limit seems to be 44 days, in which the individual loses the ability to eat, and it is no use giving him food. It is necessary to give him serum, to prepare him, to make him capable of eating again, capable of having that need. And from the psychological point of view, the same thing happens. The process of forming the neurosis that Ianov speaks of is only possible because there is this formation of the ego, which functions as a limitation of the psyche, as a self-limitation in which the psyche, demanding the greatest sacrifice of itself, this very act of self-limiting, also acquires the nucleus of its power. Only when the power of the psyche is personalized in an ego does it become truly capable of acting not only in the physical world like a baby, but in the properly human world. The ego is important because it gives the possibility of exercising power in the human sphere, a power that the individual did not have before, or at least had in such a diffuse way that it is as if the power were not his. Logical thinking is also present in animals. It is as if it were an extension of the sense of organic self-preservation, and a certain logical anticipation of physical need is present in animals. The animal creates a bridge between logical need and physical need, as in the case of the monkey who, trying to reach a banana, uses a piece of stick to knock it down. That is, he constructs a logical model in his head before picking up the stick, and he does it not out of physical need, but out of an external force that impels him to do so. Nor does he do it by chance. It is a logical behavior. What characterizes man in this sense, then, is not only the logical need with which he deals with physical need and with chance itself, but that man coheres these three forms of limitation of needs in a personal form of self-limitation, which is called ego. This ego is capable of imposing the most terrible limitations on the psyche and anticipating almost logical, physical, and accidental needs, in the sense of preventing actions that go against the interest of his organism, such as, for example, preventing him from jumping from the 10th floor. If we ask someone why he didn't jump from the 10th floor, he replies, "Because I didn't want to, because I don't want to." Of course, there is the physical impossibility of him flying around, but it is not that which prevents him from jumping, but rather himself, because he knows that it will not work. But we can ask, why does he only have to do what will work? because it is not in his interest to do the wrong thing, because he would lose his life. In short, he doesn't do it because he doesn't want to. In this sense, it is curious to observe the pleasure that a 5-year-old child feels when he begins to acquire the ability to limit himself in denying himself certain things. Because with this, he proves to himself that he is already grown up. So, the first power of the ego is over itself and over the psyche. In the animal sphere, this is different, because the animal cannot learn the synthesis of needs.